This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 51.
Right. And so we're called when things are broken. So what happens then is it's all about communication. In a time of stress, it's like, hey, we can't fix it, or the right people are fixing it. It's just about like this open communication. And
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hello, everyone. This is Ken Ehrman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here with my co-host, Mr. Matt, still in beta, Rogers. Matt, you like that one, don't you?
I do like that one quite a bit.
What's going on, man?
Hey, I am living life. We are doing well. We just got out of a really cool conversation that, and I know we'll get into it in a few moments, but it just kind of opened up my perspective a little bit, right? Like I think right now when we're recording this, we're heading into the holidays. This will come out after the holidays. I'll still be stressed and crazy. There's a different intensity after the holiday break, pushing towards testing. But, I know we were talking off air, just like there's a lot going on and a lot of responsibilities that I have no clue about. And I just assume that I have the most challenging decision in the room at all times.
Yeah, absolutely. So we get into a conversation with Jeff Dillon, who his career has been in higher ed, and his career has been in the IT side, web design. He talks about being a webmaster, and now has started his own company called EdTech Connect, which is focused on supporting higher ed and their technology needs. And we talk about K-12, we talk about higher ed, we talk about classroom implementation of technology, how to vet technology, and also the back end stuff that goes on that as classroom teachers we don't see. And I felt like I connected it with it in a different way. My position as instructional coach, I am sitting in meetings with our director of technology, as well as the guys and gals that are in there fixing teachers' computers, fixing programs, and it's just a different perspective. As a classroom teacher, it's very easy to feel like I just submitted a help request. Why isn't it fixed yet? Because we're so focused, we're so isolated in our domain of our four walls of our classroom. And, we feel that way not because we're selfish, because we want to provide the best experience for our students. We want things to work so our students can have the best learning experience. But I can tell you right now, those techs, the IT department, your business office, your central administration, they all want the same thing. And we all have different responsibilities. We all have different tasks that we have to accomplish. And I feel like the conversation with Jeff just really helps bring light to that. And, is something important for teachers to listen to, just to help kind of recenter that perspective.
I think it's a really good point. And I think on our end of things, it's been tough in a lot of places. And I think especially IT, I heard this once about how, a member of the IT department only really gets to hear from people when things are not going well. So it's a very thankless position. It's not that they don't enjoy their position, but I rush and knock down the door of my IT person when my program that I am supposedly doing right now is not working, or I have a kid that's supposed to be joining me virtual and is not able to show up, or I've got a parent that's sharing that they're having trouble. It is one of those things that you kind of ask for your IT department to provide in very unreasonable ways, and not in like harsh ways, but there's just a lot of times that they have to do a risk analysis just like we do as educators as well. What is truly the most highest priority? And I think it's really interesting from that side of things. I think, like you were saying, there are many things going on. And the fact that, you know what, I couldn't get my text centered in my LMS, and I want support on how I can make it look prettier, is probably not as important as, you know what, the multimedia went dead in this classroom so they can't present, or that this learner who's in COVID protocol can't join virtually. Those are higher level things, or the internet's down and you have to break that message to the entire staff, which I imagine never goes well, especially when your internet connects to your printers, so you don't have copies, right? So there are just really tough things that go into that role. But I think more than anything, not only is it a tough position, but there is so many responsibilities. We'll talk about this periodic table, and I think it's one of the most helpful visuals that I have seen as you're talking about resetting kind of perspectives, to be like, main categories to run them down real quick: accessibility, emerging technologies, marketing and communication, which is huge in the higher ed, but it's also in our classrooms as well. An important thing, how we are kind of getting people on board, the idea of mobile and web, network and infrastructure. We just show up and assume the Wi-Fi is going to work, but that's not how it works. Organization effectiveness, that we'll talk about, right? Efficiency is huge. Security, security, security. You know what? It's so much further than just, oh, they took this kid's pic collage on potential and kinetic energy. It's well beyond that. Student success and teaching and learning. I love this document, and it made me like drop my jaw and like, oh my goodness, they're responsible for all of that. And that right there hasn't even touched talking to a human being yet. It's just the recognition of all those responsibilities. So major kudos. And when you have a chance, go say thank you to your IT department, right? They do so much to keep you functioning and able to focus on your most number one, what we think priority and responsibility.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, there's the breadth of responsibilities that they have is so vast and diverse. And it is a thankless position, because the only time you're ever emailing your help desk or your help request line, or however your district runs that, is when something is broken. No one's sending thank you letters through the help request center. But, you know, just a quick public service announcement. You know, I have the perspective of a lot. Some of these tickets do find it to my desk if it's more instructionally related. Do yourself a favor to save yourself time. Provide way more detail than you typically do when you email those requests. Use the simple screencast tool and just screencast it right in there and send it through, because when you can provide more information, you're probably going to get a faster solution, because they'll be able to more quickly identify what's going wrong. Otherwise, you know, if you provide very little detail, you're going to get a response of, you know, is it plugged in? You know, it's not to be it, when you get that email, it usually pisses you off, because it's like, yes, I know to plug it, but the reality is there's a lot of times that it is that. Or I talk about clearing your cache, or can you just restart your computer and try it again? That when I try to help students, clearing their cache and restarting their computer probably solves 95% of the problems. So, you
Right.
know,
And when's the last time you restarted your computer? Right?
exactly.
Like,
Yep.
there are some teachers that, you know what, oh, it went to sleep. That's not the same thing.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, you know, just a quick tip for, you know, our teachers: just provide more detail. You'll get better answers. You'll get quicker answers from your fantastic IT department. So we're going to jump into the interview with Jeff. Like I said, it's different, but I think you'll enjoy it. I think you'll pick up a lot. And there are still, you know, key pieces where we talk about classroom implementation of technology, how to vet those resources, and how to integrate it into your classroom. So without any further delay, let's bring Jeff in for that awesome interview. Hi, Jeff. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing today?
Great, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, to kick things off, please officially introduce yourself to our audience, where you are coming from, and what your career has been so far. It's a little bit different than a lot of our guests that we have, and Matt and I are excited about that. Just how what your career has been and how that has circled around and related to education.
I would love to. I am in Folsom, California, which is just outside of Sacramento. I recently was the Web and Mobile Services Director at Sacramento State University for 13 years. So I'll back up before that though, and I started my higher ed career at Northern Arizona University after I actually started a web development company in Northern Arizona, and I became the first webmaster at NAU in 2000. It was a new position. Um, it wasn't in the academic side; it was in the marketing department, but they had taken the position from the IT division and put it into the marketing department. And so I took that very first webmaster job at NAU. But I learned about, I actually was involved with the migration of the LMS, which was, um, it was WebCT at the time, and we were moving to the new, latest and greatest Blackboard. So I'll remember that as my first real educational technology experience is a LMS migration, which was kind of crazy. Um, but that was 2000. So 8 years at NAU, and then what I did is I took a job at Sacramento State as a promotion to move my family to California, to take a web development director position. And so what I got to see in 2008 was the mobile revolution, basically, and that's really what a lot of my expertise was seeing the mobile space evolve and being part of that at Sacramento State. So I've never been an instructor or teacher, but I've been a guest lecturer for a computer science department at Sac State, where I'll give them a project and they'll do the QA and the testing. But under my purview at Sacramento State, we had the LMS, um, we had the web content management system, mobile app, and a lot of legacy applications. So I had an incredible team there. But I recently, in October, retired. I like to say retired because I retired from the system. I'm still working. But right before the pandemic, I started EdTech Connect, which is what I'll talk a little bit more about. So I retired from that. I'm doing my EdTech Connect business, and I'm still in Sacramento.
Excellent. That's quite the journey. So, what would you say? Digging into your webmaster experience and that IT side, be it in higher ed, I'm sure you have colleagues and you've consulted and worked with the K-12 space as well. What is the what would you say is the main role of that IT side and how it best supports students and learning? What is that connection and what are things that teachers
That's a
probably
great
aren't aware of that's a lot of times happening in the background to really support that effort?
that's a great question. I was asked recently what I thought my definition of ed tech was, or and we always hear like it's technology in support of instruction, hardware and software in support of teaching and learning. And I kind of like to take that a little further. On EdTech Connect, I have this periodic table where it defines all the different elements of educational technology, and basically it's not just what's in the classroom. And since the classroom has really evolved, I really like to tell our faculty that they used to own the classroom. Like I couldn't go in and own a classroom like a faculty member could. I didn't, it's just not my thing. But since our world has kind of flopped over the last year and a half, and we know the classroom will never be the same, what I think they really need to do is rely on their IT staff to say, "Hey, what's a better way to do this?" Because we have so many resources. One example is I always like to do a background when I'm talking to someone in a big meeting or any sort of meeting, so that someone doesn't have to choose between if they look at me or if they're looking at the screen. And it's pretty basic, but a lot of people just don't know how to do that. And they don't know how to ask. They don't know what's available. And so I hope I'm not sounding like condescending to the faculty, but I would say faculty, lean on your IT people because they know what's out there, and you may know something too, and introduce those tools to your IT people. But I would say now that the classroom has evolved, we need to look everywhere we can to find out what's available because you don't know what to ask for. um, We the support used to look like this. It'd be like, okay, I can't get this piece of technology to work. I got to call IT. I need help with my LMS, support. I got to call IT. But now it's much bigger than that, and there's so many more things going on that um, we need more of a network to support each other, I think.
I think it's a really important answer. And one of the things that I think, from the education side, we have gotten more competent with technology, but it's not fair to say that the technology hasn't gotten better at the education side as well, if not even better. I think that question that you're saying is really important because one of your roles is to vet resources and say, you know what? We have all gone to conferences and heard the person that has 17 different apps that all do the same purpose, but it's like this one has the best font and this has the best color and this has this transition that I like, and it all does the exact same thing. So what is the best bang for your buck? And honestly, on that IT side of what you're saying is, you know what, you are going through and saying, okay, here's the deal. You're going to put this in front of kids, or as a faculty member, you're going to stand in front of fellow peers. This is something that if you learn this, you're going to get many uses out of it. I have a coworker who has a policy that they have to be able to use an app or a resource for 3 distinct different reasons to make it worthwhile to download on their device. Just because otherwise, then you're just using it for the glitz and glamour, not really
Yeah.
the instructional purpose.
Yeah, that's a great guideline. I like that. And another thing I say too is, you know, there are so many supporting tools out there, and one I just ran into was a tool that the service desk can use when they're getting calls all the time from whether it's faculty or students or whatever, and they're trying to support these end users. There might be a problem with the technology that person's using. So there's companies now, there's one called TechReady that will actually check for pop-up blocker, your bandwidth, the right browser, and send the URL right to the service desk staff so they can rule that out right away. So all these things are happening, you don't even know that. And so these companies, when I started building this platform that I have, I started taking all the meetings from these vendors. When I used to say, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time, I started taking them like, gosh, I really should start listening to these people. We need to listen to these vendors that are really that are doing great work. And there's another one that's pretty incredible using AI. And we don't know the questions to ask sometimes. I keep going back to that, but we don't have the time in higher ed. Everyone's kind of busy, really busy. And so we have all this data and we don't always know how to use it. So we do know LMS usage. We have that. We can combine that with where a student's located. And so there's companies like Invoke Learning who's looking at the patterns of, let's saying, hey, these students are not doing well that live in this zip code. Like, what's going on with that? I mean, we could do things like that, but you might not know to ask. So they're finding the patterns with their AI. And so it gets all the way from as advanced as that, all the way to AI using, with chatbots so students can get support 24/7. But I just like learning about what all these companies are doing because, we have to be doing more of that, I think, and being open-minded.
I think just to follow up, kind of in the whole line, I actually have your what I believe is your periodic table, which is fascinating to look at. A, it's beautiful, and B, I think it's really neat to kind of consider all of the facets of what would go into, almost as you mentioned, your definition of educational technology. And when I'm looking at this, I see things like accessibility, emerging technologies, network infrastructure, right? Security, all these different features that, I only think of ed tech as the things that I use technology for. And so I think that's a really important thing to recognize. Even, I know it sounds silly, but to have empathy for your IT staff, because there are many other things that they're responsible for. One of the things, I don't know if it's part of the training, but it always seems like IT staff just has an incredible calm. There may be storm behind them, but they just know how to be calm amongst all of that kind of the ebbs and flow of what's going on. But can you kind of talk to us about what goes into this periodic table or in that role, because, I think of student success and teaching and learning, which are items from your periodic table. But yeah, I use accessibility. I allow kids to use dictation, so it's voice to text instead of, typing it out. But for learners with autism and visual impairments, right? To almost can to be able to provide instruction at almost that same level as any other peer through the assistance of technology is a huge feature. Security is something that no teacher wants to worry about, but is probably one of your highest priorities. Can you kind of talk to that world and that spectrum of ed tech and technology integration?
Yeah, I really like that periodic table. It's one of the most visited parts of our site. One thing about it is there's no standard for the way we classify technology. So that's our standard. That's my kind of our flexible taxonomy. And one thing about it is accessibility is at the top. And you'll never see another category where that's the case because this is for higher ed. So what I like to tell our vendors and when they're looking at our site and they're trying to decide how to participate and list their products is, you may be strong in one of these elements, one of these topics on that table, but a lot of these bigger companies hit a lot of these areas, and they cover a lot of these. And so what we want to find out is what's your core competency? And that's what it's about. And sometimes we're running into companies who are the bigger ones that you kind of sometimes felt held hostage by because we have to use them. We might not be wanting to look at these big, huge companies. We might want to be looking more at the companies who are building stuff from the ground in the cloud for higher ed specifically. And that's really, we're trying to, it really makes those companies float to the top when they pick out which topics that they're really good at. But I can't say much more about that table in that I thought, someone asked me we really need to see all the different topics that are listed on your site in one place. I'm like, okay, how do I do that? You know what? We have about 100 here and 100 on the periodic table. Let's just do it this way because it's a fun academic way to do it. But yeah, I love that you're looking at that, and it just shows the breadth of it. It's not just teaching and learning, and there's a lot of infrastructure there. And you're right, with security it's something we struggle with because no one ever thinks about it. We're constantly trying to train the entire user base, especially students. Students are the ones who kind of click on those phishing emails the most, and so it's a constant struggle to really keep people aware of what's out there and the malicious things going on.
Absolutely. And kind of on that topic, tech literacy just keeps popping into my head as we have this conversation. And, in my role as an instructional coach now, I kind of see more of a broad band of the district and just, technology, although my position is for supporting instruction, obviously technology last year and this year is a huge piece of that. And teachers know that I'm strong with it. And so I see, so often you have the conversations of, shouldn't we be teaching our students to know how to do X, Y, and Z, like save files and, all these different things and training for the staff, on that same topic. And then there's so much out there. There's so many things like, last year, a huge problem in our district was students downloading Google extensions that had malware. And it was just crushing their Chrome and it was causing problems. They weren't able to access things. And we've kind of from that security side, we've really locked that down this year. But like clearing your cache, if you've never heard of that, it's something that's slowing down your computer. If you want your Google Chrome to work faster, learn how Google clear your cache and see how to do that. It's just shutting down and restarting, like so many simple things that are important. And it's just, as teachers, we have a million things that we're responsible for teaching our students. So, are you involved in supporting your faculty or the students on campus with tech literacy and with technology constantly evolving? Where do we start? Where does that responsibility fall? And what's the way to catch up or to stay up to speed on those topics?
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting right at the core of some of the bigger struggles in my former role for so many years, especially the last few. And then there's no easy answer for it. I have somewhat of a unique perspective on this in that um, I really believe students especially don't read user manuals. They don't read training. They don't. If they can't figure this out themselves, we did something wrong. I mean, for the most part, there's outline cases. When we're talking about faculty and staff, yeah, they need training on some systems because they're using an LMS and other systems. But for students, we need to meet them where they're at. I mean, we just started realizing things have to be mobile. They don't want everything mobile, but for the most part, if you're not mobile optimized, you're not doing it right for students. And if you have to teach someone how to do something on their phone, you haven't done it right either. So, security is just a constant struggle. And I think, I keep going back to this, but there's been a lot of brain drain in higher ed in the last, not just year or two. It's been over the last 7 years. I've seen it happen where some of the best people were leaving for the private sector before the pandemic, and that's just accelerated. And so what we have to do is it's a race to the cloud. And so we're more secure in the cloud. And these, if you just look at some of the better companies, the products are incredible. The way the interface works, what they're integrated with. If they have a platform that they've done right, they've already built integrations with the tools you need, and it should be fairly easy. So you got to. I mean, it's really about finding the right partner. And I think there's some that are better than others, but um, this one we could talk about for a while. There's no easy answer, but it's fun to kind of go back and forth with it. I would be kind of interested in the difference between all my experiences in higher ed. Is there a difference in K-12? It's like herding cats sometimes in higher ed with, that's so decentralized. I would think maybe it's a little more centralized in K-12, but you can't. It's hard to say.
In what capacity do you mean in terms of being decentralized?
Like choosing what tools you can and are using as a faculty member, as an instructor,
I
for
would
one
say,
example.
and Matt, jump in on this one, but I would say that is going to be very different depending on where you go, district to district. I think some of the districts are incredibly centralized. I can speak to mine specifically. Over the last 2 years, we've become very centralized. The instructional coach team and the district office has worked really hard to try to consolidate, not just from a restriction standpoint, like you're only allowed to use these, but we have the list of these are the apps, these are the programs, these are the companies that we endorse, that we are paying for. And we kind of have we covered all of our instructional needs by subject, by age level, and saying these are what we support, these are what we're providing trainings on, these are the ones you should be using. And then when teachers come to us with things outside of that, we'll still support them and explore with them, but there's also the understanding that they're not going to get the same level of support as with a endorsed tool from the district. But you go 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I mean, it was the Wild West. We're in the process of kind of cleaning up like our iPad catalog for that reason. And I think if you go to other districts, just depending on the leadership style, there are still many of them that are probably working in the Wild West. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so to give some context, I got an iPad in my classroom 6 weeks after it was unveiled on stage. So I was teaching special ed at the time, and there was a perspective of it having assistive technology. And at that point, the ecosystem wasn't iPad friendly. It took quite a bit for it to be a real instructional device. That, you know what, it was an expensive dictionary. We had some games that they would earn reward time on, but I really struggled to say, hey, the amount of time I'm spending doing research and all these things was not turning into worthwhile instruction until we really integrated LMSs. But I think my district, and I say this with a lot of appreciation, our district became very tech competent early on, that there's a lot of trust in the staff to make good decisions. And so, Ken, I think differently from you, yeah, we're kind of still in the wild, wild west because it always worked out really well for us. At the beginning of the year, we have a document that we list the apps we want on our devices. So we're K through 4, where they have iPads, and then 5 through 12, they have MacBooks. So the MacBooks have a little bit more flexibility that the staff can say, hey, we use Schoology as our LMS, but beyond that, you can justify maybe in an internet restriction. You know what? If there's an app that you would like to use or a website you'd like to have available and you can justify it, it's pretty easy within the district to get that approval. So it's, I almost want to say, Ken, to your point, like, I know that they have identified what apps they really are emphasizing, what LMS they're emphasizing, but there is no mandate. And I think we actually had a recent thing about parent communication. And they tried to switch parent communication all over to Schoology, and that's the emphasis of the district. At the end of the, I mean, I want to say 3 weeks in, when we had a roster of 24 and only 3 parents that actually signed up to Schoology, and on our Facebook pages, they're like, hey, where's our standard communication? That was one of those things that, they, the district kind of pulled back and said, oh, what you have going is working until it turns into an issue. But if you have a suggestion, right, a big portion in at least my area is a lot of our programs are purchased by our local IU 13, our intermediate unit. So, you know what? We have a Brain Pop subscription. We have Discovery Ed program subscription. We have access to VR through that. Those are what I would say they emphasize, because not only do you have localized support within district, but you also have like the county-wide support and other teachers that are using it. I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but that's
Yeah. I like to hear more about K-12. It's no surprise there really. Um, I thought it'd be more centralized than higher ed in general because we're all over the place too. But one example where you can kind of I would say how to say it is kind of meet your end users halfway, I guess, is right before I left Sac State, we were getting this signing this contract with Reclaim Hosting because we have a central content management system. We had this great project a couple years ago to centralize everything, and it went pretty well. It's pretty stressful, but we're very centralized in our web publishing model at Sac State. But there's still outliers everywhere. There's auxiliaries, there's athletics, there's a library that kind of do their own thing, and there's always someone wanting to do something that I can't use a CMS for whatever reason. They get that approved and so they want to go off and use Drupal or WordPress. Great. But our ISO freaks out then, and it's hard. So Reclaim Hosting has a place where you say, okay, you can do that, but you got to use Reclaim Hosting because we can control all the modules. It's a domain of one's own, so we control the namespace. If there's a security issue, we can easily take care of that. And then you just got to take care of the governance with who's going to deal with the WordPress, the plugins and all that stuff. But it's a little better, like you're saying, okay, if you can't use it, the central system, we have this other one you can use, which pretty much satisfies all their needs. So I was real excited to see that come on. But there's, it's hard to say that, to even imagine what's out there that could really kind of solve these problems that we're battling with control versus flexibility. It's a zero sum game almost sometimes with that.
well, and I loved reading. So when it comes to EdTech Connect, at least in the origin of what I read, is it comes down to polling different people that you respect and you care about, right? And how they feel about how they're conquering problems that they're dealing in a similar position that you're in. I mean, Ken and I have both been in message boards and Facebook groups and, going door to door to ask fellow staff, how are they handling these issues? And what I loved is like what you said, the concept of how can we get almost this evaluative system to say, here's a program that we actually feel is worthwhile financially, worth the time. You know what? I'm going to shift my entire staff in a certain direction, and I want to make sure it's the right direction to go in. That's a huge decision. And I mean, I would imagine at higher ed, a lot of the staff are experts in their field. They know what they're talking about, and they almost feel like they have a responsibility to have the answers to the questions that haven't been asked yet. So kind of being in that position, whereas teachers in K through 12, Some are in that realm. Some are, please let me go back to pencil and paper and I don't need to touch device at all, right? There's a spectrum there, but there's less, I want to say, mastery, that kind of um, air of thinking. I don't know if that's the best way to put it. But can you
Yeah,
kind of
it's not their
talk
it's
about?
not their core competency, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the idea behind EdTech Connect is that, there was never a model like this, and I'd wanted to do something like this for a while, and luckily I started it right before the pandemic. I mean, just by chance. And that just accelerated everything because the model is, let's not put the university at the center of this conversation anymore. I love EDUCAUSE, I love the higher education user group. There's consulting firms all over. There's the Benchmarking Institute for Community Colleges. I could name them, dozens of other regional ones have the same model. Why are we putting the institution at the middle? Because they control the data and the community. So if we take that out of the picture and we go right to the people using the software, why don't we crowdsource this to those people, verify who they are with their .edu? We can start to segment them by their role, and then we get a real-time snapshot of what's happening in technology, and it's a ratings and review platform as well. So I think it's what it is. What I've built with that Tech Connect is kind of a G2 crowd, if you know, a software rating platform with a little bit of a LinkedIn feel and kind of a Wikipedia, but all for higher ed. And really, there's no cost for anyone. All users, if with your .edu EMS, you sign up for free. And I've had a lot of people say, "Yeah, could you do this for K-12?" And we could. We probably have about 50% or more overlap with the software. But what everyone loves in higher ed about it is the exclusivity. Because I know with that .edu, you're affiliated with an institution. So someday I think we'll maybe branch into that. But for now, that's kind of where we're at, is building this platform that's really democratized that conversation, so we can see real time. Because what's prompted this, in January, I was asked to find a cloud workflow solution for our school. And that sounds great, but you know how many amazing cloud workflow solutions are out there? And then I had to find out, okay, which ones are you higher ed focused? And they always want to say they are, but I want to see the proof of it. So, I want to know, how higher ed focused are you? What clients do you have? And we have all that. If a vendor wants to sign up and claim their free listing, they got to tell us a little bit about their focus. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Well, I think it's fantastic that you're doing that because I mean, even for someone as myself that I'm pretty comfortable with technology, I'm comfortable with exploring it and kind of like you said, if you can't figure it out, you build something wrong. But there's just so much out there. It's so hard to stay up to date. It's so hard to take all the different categories that have on your periodic table into context. But something you mentioned earlier, it made me think of a interaction I had with a teacher. I think it was this year, maybe it was last year, but real simple story. I showed the teacher, we use Canvas in our district, and I showed the teacher how they could take their Google slide presentation and instead of linking to it, so the students would click on it, it would take them to a new tab, that they could embed it directly on the page in Canvas. And the teacher was mind blown by it and said to me, "This is amazing." You know, he said, "Why did I not know about this?" He said, "Do others know about it?" I said, "I think some, I said, I know some teachers do use it. I try to show as many people as I can when I work with them." And he said, I didn't even know that this was a possibility. I didn't even know that I should ask about asking about this. Like it's totally out of context. And he said, how are we supposed to know what questions to ask when we don't even know there are questions to ask? And so from your perspective, I know you're on more of the IT side. I know you're more on the higher ed side, but just in general for educators, whether they're K-12 or they're higher ed, how do we ask questions that we don't know exist, if that makes sense? Like, how can we be more inquisitive about possibilities to become more efficient is a huge piece, or just a little bit more user friendly for the students. But how do we discover that stuff when we don't even know that we're missing it?
I wrote an article about this. If you look on my LinkedIn, and one of the quotes was, Henry Ford said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses. And Steve Jobs has a similar quote. It's a little more rude, but there's no that's part of why EdTech Connect exists, because we want those stories and those use cases to, we want to tell those stories. And, I say, go back again to say, you got to leverage your network, and there's a network disparity out there with, I don't really have much of a network. Well, maybe you start with your IT people, and what I like about what happened, a good thing, a silver lining out of this pandemic, is that, the central IT department used to be the bad guys. I mean, it really was tough to get a good, you're slowing things down, like, oh, I have to give you more requirements and this and that. We're the heroes now. And so we're really, we have some political capital, and, like, look, we can help you. We want to help you. Um, so I would say start with your network. If you don't have a great network, reach out to any of your IT people within higher ed that can, you know, like you say, you don't know what to ask, but at least, be around, proximity to greatness, or it's a great thing to ponder, at least.
And I think, and that just leads to, just when you're around people that are in that field, and you don't shy away from having the conversation, and being afraid to look silly, right? So that's how all education growth happens. And in that SAMR model, how we try to integrate technology more fluidly into our classroom, the whole concept, the reason why Ken and I are sitting here having a conversation, is to talk about ways that we can adjust our classrooms that can be more appropriate, more engaging, but more than anything, give a better learning experience that drives deeper, giving possibilities to kids that are higher reward with lower risk. And the integration of technology is legitimately the world at the child's fingers if they use it appropriately. And so there are plenty of ways that I'm sure, Jeff, you could dive in, but that's what you're saying with IT people. In that IT staff, they can sit there and say, if I walk up to my IT staff and say, I want to do something cool with my kids, that is not very descriptive. But if I say, you know what, we're doing this experience with the Middle Ages right now, and we're talking about the experience of being in battle, or whatever the case may be, defending a territory, you know what, that might say, hey, I was watching this demo example, and we just got this VR set, and we have a similar simulation that the kids can feel what it was like, the pressure and the anxiety and the challenge and the bravery. That, that is just an open conversation that wouldn't have
Yeah,
happened if you just sat there
yeah,
and said,
right.
hey, I'm gonna dress up in a silly outfit and say that I'm a lord, and you're gonna follow my direction. Like that,
Yeah, yeah,
unfortunately,
yeah,
that's how we do things. And I think, Ken, your question is unfortunately something we all feel in many ways, whether it's we don't know the questions to ask, or we're too worried about talking about a topic we don't feel super confident about. I
yeah,
feel I feel pretty comfortable in technology, but I still
yeah,
don't know if I want to get into the weeds with some of my IT tech staff. Surprise, they would love to have conversation and guide you
yeah.
to the
They
understanding.
love to help you. For the
Yeah.
most part, IT people love to help you. And, I'm thinking about that question again, Ken. And one way we can do it is to really, and anyone can do it, not just faculty. Like, I find myself in my own hole, like, just got to get this done, get it out. But what if we said, hey, just ask someone else, how can I improve this? How can I improve this? And leave it open. But at least don't get stuck in your silo, and maybe you don't have a great network, but the closest person you have that's maybe has some experience, and say, hey, is this engaging? How can I improve it? And you don't know what to ask, but at least have some other eyeballs on what you're doing. I mean, maybe that's a start.
Yeah, and even ask your students. You know,
Hmm.
hey, does
There you
do any
go.
of your other teachers do this any different, or do I do
Yeah,
something that seems clunkier or less efficient than one of your other teachers that you go
yeah,
into class with? They would be able to provide great information for you. I'm sure, or even something that all the teachers could learn from, just because the students know it themselves. But it is hard because you don't know what you don't know, and it's such an easy phrase to use. But like you said, just asking someone, is this the best way to do it, or is there a more efficient way? That's something that I think what matters most is the atmosphere that we create for students to thrive in learning. in K-12 and higher ed. But being efficient is a huge factor for educators and professors, because when we're more efficient, we can spend more of our time focusing on teaching and learning. And technology has great power to allow us to be so much more efficient. Simple things like, if you use Gmail, have you ever heard of template responses? Because if you haven't, and you send a standardized email a lot, you should look at, it's called templates, right? In Gmail. Yeah, create templates. I mean, I use that constantly because I send very similar emails, and it's just a copy and paste function, but it lives in your email, and you have 5, 10, 20, 50 of them that just automatically paste in. It puts the subject in, it does it all for you. That's an efficiency piece. If you send a lot of standardized emails, you should be taking advantage of that so you can spend less time doing that. Things automatically grading. If you're doing multiple choice, you should spend 0 seconds grading multiple choice as a teacher. So, those technology efficiencies can really impact our position to better serve students.
That's a great point, Ken. And I think one other point is not just when you're struggling. If we're always doing something the same way, you don't think about it. I think that's when we really need to step back and say, "Hey, I haven't looked at this course for a while. Maybe I should have someone look at it." So, yeah, totally agree.
And I think that efficiency is a great way to get someone on board. I think, when whether it's a grade book, something I started doing this year is I've used my LMS grade book that I then take the percentage and I put into my report card software. And I don't like my report card software because it times out. So I'll have a whole line of grades in, and if I didn't hit save quick enough, then I've lost all of that. That was an irritation and got a lot of people going back to paper-based grade books. But I can just take that 100% and put it right in. And in my LMS, I can put in a rubric that I'm going to use consistently and automatically grade it. And Ken, like you're saying, the automatic grading. And the concept here is not only are you spending as much time, right? I could potentially spend as much time. You're really not doing it right if you're spending more time by using technology. But the ultimate goal is to spend significantly less time. And there's ways to do that you as an educator can earn back time, as you were mentioning, to do what you are paid to do, which is make an impact on kids. And whether that's, you earn more time to provide feedback, right? Or you have a ability to pull a kid to the side and say, like we do a multiple choice a test, and I can see immediately who I need to pull and do a revision with. That makes a huge difference, that it's fresh in their mind. We know how it went. And worst case scenario, if they retake it, no one knows that in 7 minutes later, they got a slightly better score. That makes a huge difference in the long term for both me as the instructor and for the kids' end of things.
That's a great point. You reminded me of something we did. It was probably 8 years ago when the SIS and the LMS didn't really talk well with each other. And we realized we were talking to faculty, and that because we were talking to faculty, central IT, we realized how much time they were spending moving their grades to the SIS. So we built it for them. We're like, just hit this button when you're done with your semester. And so by you talking to your staff, you might be fixing a problem for the whole university. If you're doing, we found out that they were spending so much time, and now they can spend that time doing something else.
So I want to tap into your expertise here, Jeff. Your positions that you've had in the universities and working with EdTech Connect now, or starting it yourself. One of your main roles, like you talked about, is vetting and talking to these vendors and that type of stuff. So, whether it's a higher ed faculty member or a K-12 educator looking to explore new technology, what would you say are, I'm going to ask two different questions related to the same topic of finding new tools. If I know I want to do something specific, what's the best way? And I have no idea what tools are out there. What's the best way to start my search? And then once I start my search, what are things I should look for to vet a tool in terms of being reliable and user friendly and solving the problem that I'm looking to solve?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always tell people to start with their network. So faculty, really, sh- hopefully they know someone in their department. If that, and what are they doing? Do they have the same struggle? Can they help you at all? Um, when you eventually land on a search somewhere, whether it's on EdTech Connect or somewhere where you're searching by whatever term you're searching by, and that's a struggle in itself. But you're gonna have a slew of vendors, and what you want to do is really define yourself. What are the just the couple things you're really trying to do? Um, I start at the company itself though, because I really think there is value in there's so many companies that are focused on higher ed, and they're building their products with higher ed as their core competency and use case. So we're trying to make that easier to define because you can't really tell by their website sometimes. But if you're on a site and you don't see anything about education, you might it might be a little bit of a red flag, unless it's a company that's 100% education. It's a given, right? So those are obvious. The Canvas, the enterprise. But aside from that, either we have there's a sweet spot of 20% more of their business is higher ed. You're important to that customer. I'm not going to call out any names of these huge companies, but there's huge companies that when you look at their product or you talk to a salesperson, you sure it sounds great, and they're a big company, but their licensing doesn't work for higher ed. Their pricing doesn't work for higher ed. Our use cases are not there. So what you want to do is see who else, if you talk to someone, how has someone else used this? Is it going to, is it really designed for what you're trying to do? I'm trying to think of a good example. One is, I mean, everyone knows, a lot of people know about Loom. Um, it's which is used in all sorts of industries. That one isn't just obviously education, but um, if you can't really try out the product and without some sort of intervention from the company, that's kind of tough sometimes. I really like some of the best companies give you a full free trial, or they make it pretty easy to use the product, and then they may hook you with like, okay, you got to pay now, but that's fine if it's going to work for you. So tough, great question. Not an easy answer, but I would say look for how much of this company is focused on higher ed. Reach out to your network. That's really what EdTech Connect is all about. We're trying to solve that problem. Um, and those are kind of some suggestions.
Well, and I think that I mean, us as K-12 teachers often live in that freemium category where it's free as much as we can handle, and we exploit that as much as possible. And we just beg our staff to say, oh, do you have a few extra dollars you can cover this, or whatever the case would be, right? So on that higher end spectrum, the expectation, and honestly, with experts and people that really are respected in their field, there is an element of maintaining the highest quality and having that available, and the best user experience for the staff and students because it is an industry. But it's also having that material protected and specific to the university, right? So they're getting all the credit that they can. So there is some margin to make those choices, but they're financially binding, and you want to make a good choice. I want to just say that I spent some time and I got myself lost in EdTech Connect. I just want to say, listeners, if you want to just look at a beautiful website, it just is gorgeous. And I feel like the intended purpose is upfront. And I may not be familiar with a lot of these companies, and that's the whole concept, right? To expose and have high quality content up front. But it is a fantastic resource that I feel like you've done an incredible job being upfront with how you can just see it and recognize the purpose, the organization. So I think even I'm the type person that if I see someone's LMS class and I'm like, wow, they did a great job of structuring it, you need to see this as a guidance, a model of how an LMS can look. I would say definitely for this website, it looks phenomenal.
Thanks, Matt.
So I just want to say, Matt, when you were talking about the freemium, just as advice for our educators, our faculty members, our higher ed individuals, don't be super cheap like I was for years trying to find every app that was the free version of a great app that only costs $5.99. I often joke with people they'll spend 20 minutes waiting in a line at Starbucks trying to find the free version of a $4.99 app, and then they'll spend $6 on a latte before they leave the store. But you know, when you invest in something that costs money, that company is making money, and then they are more likely going to
Reinvesting.
be around the
Yeah,
next school year when you go to
yeah,
use it again. So,
yeah,
you know, I'm not saying that you should be dumping hundreds or thousands of dollars a school year, but if you can kind of find a way to allocate maybe a even just $100 a year in your classroom budget if you have it, or your department budget, it's so valuable because you'll spend so much less time redoing all of your work constantly because the app you used to use is now not supported. It doesn't update with, you know, new computer updates, tablet updates, that type of thing. So definitely invest your time in and a little bit of money in the products that are going to be most supportive for you, or even just using, you know, sometimes like, you know, Pear Deck and Nearpod are an example where I love those tools, but in my instructional style, I didn't have the need for the premium version of them. But they're products that a lot of teachers pay for the premium, so I knew it was a product that's going to be reliable and around for a long time. So I want to Matt, do you want to jump in real quick?
I was just going to say the other thing, and Jeff, to not to drive this home, but have that conversation with IT staff of the programs that you're using, because that may end up making it into the keystone apps or the programs that are funded. If you are kind of saying it's worthwhile, it's making a difference, and this is what I'm comfortable with.
yeah, yeah. It's a great point about the free version, the free stuff, Ken, and about, talk to your IT people. One more thing I have to say is, you'll hear a lot about accessibility, and really that a lot of that falls on the central IT department. Sometimes it's different in different schools, but you know, don't get too far down the road before you have someone check that. That's real. There's real compliance issues, and so good vendors will that are higher ed will know that, and they'll be much better than the vendors that aren't, because there's another standard for public institutions that way.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's so much that you when you're the classroom teacher, when you're the faculty member, there's so much you don't know about that back end stuff, that just security, accessibility, like those features like you've talked about a couple times, Jeff, that are important to be checked out by someone that knows a lot more in that field. So we have a segment that we always end our show with called the exit ticket. The same four questions we ask every guest every week. So I've kind of modified them a little bit to fit our conversation here tonight, which has been really enjoyable. So the first question is, I substituted the word professional for teacher. What is the best thing a professional can do to make a student's experience better, whether that be in a K-12 or more specifically a higher ed experience?
Oh, that's a great one. I would say try to put yourself in the position of that person, and be empathetic as much as possible. And if we're talking about students, you know, one thing I probably shouldn't get too far into and start a whole other conversation is, a lot of our students in California are struggling with basic needs. So let's make sure we meet students where they're at, and make sure they have the tools they need, the internet access they need, and let's try not to get over their heads. But um, that's my short answer to that one.
I think that's perfect. So, you obviously have great experience, and you also have kind of shifted into an education focused effort, which is awesome. Is there a piece of advice that sticks out? Best piece that you may have received? It was from a colleague, supervisor, or even someone in the field of education, a student that guided you along the way.
You know, you can really do anything, anything you want, um, if you put your user first. Who said that to me? One of my first bosses was talking to me about really user experience. I spent the last few years of my career really focusing on user experience. And so um, she really gave me advice about, put your end user, your customer first, and everything will kind of fall into place. Um, I always kind of fall back on that one. So,
And I think we can
That,
connect with our
yeah, I think
students,
it.
our families. Yeah.
Yeah, I
yeah,
think it's.
students or customers or
Yeah, it's so important that that central IT department in a higher ed institution or K-12. Those end users are the students, they're the teachers, they're the parents, and I have found that in working more closely with them in my new role, that they really are focused on that. It might not always feel like that as a teacher, but when that department is focused on those end users, it sounds so commercial, using the term end user, but it's a great way to describe who you're helping, and you're helping those students and those teachers and those family members without a doubt.
So the next question really comes down to what happens during times of stress. And I think it's interesting, Jeff, your times of stress may not be my time of stress in the classroom. Ours are typically conferences or report cards. Yours might be rolling out material at the beginning of the semester, or the professor that says, hey, I need something for like 4 o'clock and it needs to work perfectly type scenario. Hope probably unrealistic, but what is something that you feel like is a thing you would share to help power up and to meet that challenge and conquer it as best as possible?
yeah, times of stress. I'll really defer to my career, not what I'm doing right now, but stress in IT is when things are broken, things are down. I mean, that's really our stress because it's almost a utility, right? And so we're called when things are broken. So what happens then is it's all about communication. In a time of stress, it's like, hey, we can't fix it, or the right people are fixing it. It's just about like this open communication, and people can't take their classes. This is down. I mean, that is the most stressful thing that these IT people can go through. And so I would just say, when things are broken, just we just need to communicate as best we can from both sides. It's always a tough situation, but that's kind of all you can do.
It really is, and so often that gets forgotten, but that communication is so key to keep everybody calm, keep everybody informed. I think it's very ironic that today we're recording this episode that Amazon Web Services is like
Yeah.
down throughout the entire world. There was a little notification when I signed on for a platform here, but it ensured me Riverside.fm communicated that Amazon Web
Yeah.
Services was down, but everything would still upload. It just might take a little bit longer, and I felt better. So it
Yeah.
was clear, banner
Yeah.
communication right on the platform that made me feel better.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
the last question we have are what separates people who from what separates individuals from those that kind of just stay stagnant in what they're doing from those who are constantly seeking change, innovation, and new strategies to improve their position, their department, or their role.
Yeah, that I think that can really vary depending on the person. I think oftentimes it's fear. Sometimes people that's just their nature is to be in this secure, familiar place. Maybe it's not as much fear, but you know, so many reasons could cause kind of one person to be different than another in that way. Um, I tend to be a little more on the like let me do something different kind of side, but um, yeah, that could go all different ways. I often think it's a lot of I don't I'm scared to try something new because I can't see the end of where that will take me. And to make a jump to say I'm going to make a jump because this just doesn't feel right. I need to change. A lot of people can't do that. It's tough. But I don't want people to follow their passion. I really am in a good place now because I have this entrepreneurial spirit. I have this education technology spirit, and I put them together. And so it's really fun time for me right now.
You've really merged a pretty good thing together. So to kind of continue this journey, how can our audience continue to connect with you, get advice, and benefit from all of this incredible work that you're putting forward?
You know, um, I would say if you're in higher ed, I would love you to take a look at EdTech Connect and sign up. We are only higher ed right now, but you can browse the site a little bit. It's pretty locked down if you're not. You can check out the software titles. You won't get as much information, but if you're not, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. I think we could maybe put that in the show notes.
Yep,
Totally.
absolutely.
But otherwise, um, yeah, just um, check out edtechconnect.com. That would be great. And that's about it.
Excellent. Yeah, we will. We'll link to everything. We'll put your website, your LinkedIn handle. Maybe we can share a direct link to the periodic table, or even put it right on the show notes page. But everything will be found on our website at powereduup.com/show51. So we'll have all that information there, and as well as anything else that we've shared throughout the episode. So, Jeff, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I think it was a different perspective for our audience. I think it's great to hear, all the pieces that go into running a successful higher ed program, which is very comparable to a K-12 program as well. And I know we have listeners in both ends of education. Even just like the business office. The business office is a huge part in a successful organization, and that's what a higher education university is, and that's what a K-12 district is. It's an organization all fed towards making a better experience, and educating our students, and it's important for all of those capacities to work together. So it's been a lot of fun to kind of to dive into your side of that, and how you're supporting higher education. I think is a fantastic cause, and I look forward to continuing to watch how EdTech Connect grows. So thanks again to everyone listening. Thank you for joining us. If you haven't already, please subscribe to us on whatever podcast app you are listening to. Or if you're on YouTube or you want to go to YouTube, we are on there as well. So subscribe to us on YouTube. And please share this out so other educators can continue to learn from the great guests that we have, and just continue to push education in a positive way. So, Jeff, thanks again. And Matt, why don't you shut us down for the night?
All right, Jeff, you left us feeling powered up as we power down this episode. Everyone stay well, charge up, and get through the holidays. And January's coming when this episode probably comes out, and a big push to get through the cold winter, but make every moment count, and stay well. And we'll talk to you guys next time.